Okay, everyone. Welcome to today's JavaScript session. Are you guys excited? Woo! Some of you. So in Germany, that doesn't work at all, by the way. So to let you know, Tableau is a pretty geeky company, right? We have a nice front end, but you are definitely like the geekiest out of the geekiest. The fact that you're joining a JavaScript session when you're having such a nice looking front end. But let me tell you the following, I love to geek out as well. So therefore, it should be fine. Is there somebody in the room who did watch our session last year? Just a couple? That's great. That's great. We have some new content for those of you who visited last year. So there's one video out there. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's the German Coast Guard. And actually it has nothing to do with the session other than there's a German in there and you have a German on stage over here. But it's really a fun video which shows that German Coast Guard at his first day of the job. And if the network would work fine, we could have a look at that. But it seemed to not work right now. Give me one more second. I tried with that cable over here. Or all of you need to leave the Wi-Fi. Okay, let's do the following thing. Once I switch it over to Jackson afterwards, we will have a look at that because you definitely need to see that, I promise. Okay, so what are we going to see for today's session? We have got the following session flow. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on. Here we go. Let's skip the YouTube video. Without internet, it's not working fine. So let me introduce you to Jackson. Jackson is one of our dev artists. So Jackson is developing our JavaScript API. So if there's anything not working or you want to improve it, just talk to Jackson. He should be able to talk about that. When Jackson is not working on the JavaScript API, he loves to geek out at the JavaScript API community. And in his private life, he's actually a Zen master in ping pong. So if you're searching for a competitor, just reach out to him.
All right, thanks, Timo. Now allow me to introduce Timo. So Timo has spent his last 10 years in the field of data analytics. He spent his first 6 at IBM. And then he realized that Tableau is the Swiss Army knife in analytics, so he joined Tableau. And for the past 4 years, he's been out in the field helping customers and creating solutions for them. And in his free time, he's geeking out in his own Tableau forum, where he's sharing a lot of the cool things that Tableau can do. And today, he'll be showcasing many of those today.
Thank you, Jackson. So let's have a look at the stuff we are going to cover for today. So we will have a look at how to actually create stuff like that, like 100% custom look and feel things. That was the example from last year. We will show you different ones. We will also have a look at how Tableau can work together with third-party tools, whatever that is. And we're going to create some crazy apps as well. So last year, we were coming up with that one. So it was something called Swipe Right. Are some of you familiar with Tinder? I mean, nobody knows, but it's quite successful, right? So what we came up with was you could actually swipe visits from Tableau Public to the right if you like them. And if they're just kind of cool but not awesome, then to the left. And yeah, you could see how that is working together with Tableau. And we will create something cool but different than that one this year as well. So I don't know if you talk in front of a large audience, but if you do, some people like it, some people don't. And even if you like it, you probably hate it to write in front of a large audience. And we're going to put that to the next level. We are going to code in front of you, right? And if it's not working out, that's not because of us, it's because of you, because crowd participation is required. Okay, so for any typos, it's not our fault. Cool, what will the session flow be about? I already had a discussion around what's the level of that session going to be? And it's hard to say, right? Because we don't really require that you're having JavaScript skills. We will use some code which is already there and then modify that. And you can actually download everything which we're going to create together today and make a use of that in your company as well. But yeah, we will start with a level set, so to bring everybody on the same page. Then we're going to see how Tableau works with third-party tools. And then we will have a look at how other customers of Tableau are actually leveraging the JavaScript API. So we will see a bunch of different examples, just talk really quick about them so that you see, okay, that was the problem a company was trying to solve, and that's how they solved it. And then that gives you some ideas around what you could do with it. And just as a level set, where does the JavaScript API fit into in the whole Tableau platform, which you already heard in the keynote this morning? So the data connectivity is really like all the databases and apps you can connect to. Automation is mainly like the REST API, how to automate things via tab commands, stuff like that. Data science integration is our SPSS or our direct connections to also MATLAB in the near future, and Python. Embedded analytics, that's really where we're looking at today, how you can actually leverage the JavaScript API. And then extensions, of course, pretty interesting topic. We're not going to cover that today, but feel free to visit other sessions about that. So what is the JavaScript API? The JavaScript API is mainly a library of functions which you can use to dynamically load vizzes in your application. Whether that's a mobile application or that's a web application, it just simply needs to talk HTML, JavaScript, and then everything which is attached to it. And next to just loading vizzes, of course, you can interact with them from the outside to the inside and vice versa. And yeah, for all these different kind of interactions, you can use the JavaScript API. It's pretty powerful, and the whole session is about how you can use it and for what can you use it for. But just talking about that is not as much fun as really get our fingers dirty, so let's do it. And again, crowd participation required, just so that you remind you. So what I did is I prepared an empty web page, which is simply just a container of, well, our TC Vegas web app, and we want to embed a Tableau visualization into it. And the easiest way of how you can embed things is, of course, when you're having a look at that share button, you can simply take the embed code and then making use of that in your application. So on the right-hand side, that's the editor where I'm going to edit the web page you just saw. And we're putting in that code in here, the embed code, which is as easy as you would embed a YouTube video on your YouTube, on your portal, on your internal portal or external portal. And here we go, right? You just embedded that viz into your application. Well, what's the disadvantage of doing it in that way? It's static, right? So you can't like add some buttons around it over here and saying, okay, I want to filter on something. It's just there. It's one viz. It's dynamically, from a data perspective, it will be as current as the data which is underneath. But yeah, you can't interact with that from the outside world. So what we want to do is we want to take that visualization over here, embed it into our application, and then making it interact from the outside. Okay, and therefore, you should start to Google for the Tableau JavaScript API, because that's how I learn new things. So I will make the whole journey with you, how I did it, in the next 10 minutes. So I'm simply searching for that. And every time I'm starting something new, especially in web development, I'm not looking for all that, which is available, or looking for the reference, which is just way too much. I'm searching for a keyword called tutorial, because oftentimes you're getting to have some buttons which do something, and then you have the code below it, and that's exactly what you will have here as well. So the first code over here, let's just run it to see what happens, loads a viz, right? And then I see something like filter and tab, so these things are interacting with the viz. So rather than making everything a word to myself at the very beginning, let's just copy and paste the dynamically initializing viz function, and let's get rid of the static thing we just had here. So let's put it into our script tag. So this is our very first function, and let's walk ourselves through it. So we are having a function called initializeViz. It's taking a div container. So for those of you who are not in web development, that's basically just a container within your web page. And we're going to fill that container called Tableau viz with the following URL. That was just the viz we had. So let's replace that with the viz. It's the worst, right? With the viz. You're getting it. And so let's replace that with that viz. And let's put it in here because we want to show something we have on our own Tableau server. And you can just get rid of everything which is behind the question mark. If you leave it in there, it's fine as well because the JavaScript API will simply override it. And then we have a couple of options we can set, pretty much like you can put them into the end of the URL, like size and show tabs or not. So let's set a viz, and let's set a height. And then we want to hide the tabs, we want to hide the toolbar, which is basically all the stuff you see on top of here. And then we simply load that viz into our div with the URL we set with all the options we defined. Well, if we would now run it, let's save it, and let's run it, then, I mean, it wouldn't load. And there are two reasons for that, right? We don't have a button or something which is calling that function. And on the other hand side, we didn't tell where's the library, like what is that function all about, right? So let's go to our very first page because you can see this is easily the reference to the JavaScript API. There's a public server available to that, or if you're using that internally, you probably want to use your own server. And dependent on your setup, it's HTTP or HTTPS, and then simply you type in your server name, which for me is simply Tableau server. Last but not least, so now the function initialize viz is known by that library. I just need to add a button to it to make it work. So let's create a button, and let's set an onClick function. And this onClick function should call the function initialize viz. Let's call the button start, and then we're closing that button. Okay, so let's reload our page. Let's click the button, and here's our viz. First applause, I just need to keep you active. Love the passion. Okay, so I mean, that was the basic stuff, right? So we have that function, now we can reuse it, and we could also replace certain things within here to show different vizes after time, but the most common scenario really is to filter on something, on a certain customer set, on certain machines, whatever it is. So back in our tutorial, there's a function, and again, I'm just taking it and make it my own. So, I mean, what is it? What is it doing right now? Currently, it's filtering a single value. Then this is just using our JavaScript API, so it's filtering asynchronously on something called region. And region, if you hover over it, is simply the dimension name. So let's see what our dimension name looks like. So I have something called viz cluster, because within here you can't see it, there are different clusters. So let's replace it by viz clusters, and then we can simply define which cluster we want to filter on. So we have cluster 1, 2, 3. So let's just choose one of it. Let's say cluster 2, and then we give it a better name, filter on cluster. Again, we're going to take the button we already had. That's not lazy, that's efficient. And we're filtering on a cluster, and we're filtering on cluster 2. So let's bring that page back up here. Let's reload the viz. Let's press the start button, and let's filter on cluster 2. And here we go. It works. Thank you. But it's still, I mean, there's one thing. I now filter on a single value. Of course, I want to make that dynamic. And now that's just basic JavaScript that has nothing to do with Tableau, but it's powerful if you bring both worlds together. So let's say we're adding a text field to it. So an input type of text. And we're going to give it an ID. It's the user input so that we can reference exactly that field later on. And we simply close it. And now, rather than saying we're filtering on cluster 2 statically, we are going to filter on the user input. So let's say we're going to replace that by document get element by ID. For those of you who are aware of JavaScript, that's like the most common thing you're using, or at least myself. And we're going to use the user input field, right? That's exactly the text field we just created. And we want to take the value out of that, and that's the value we want to filter on. So now we are filtering on cluster X because it's based on our user input. Let's start it, That's the visualization. Now let's call it cluster 3, filtering on that. Cluster 1, filtering on that. Cluster 2, working on that. Works fine. One last applause. But now, to make it a little bit more geeky looking and fun, I already prepared like nicer buttons than these two ones. So let me just bring that in. It's basically this. It looks difficult, so that's why I prepared it. But it's basically simply a CSS kind of field I'm going to use. You will see it in a second. It's really fun. So there are two things. So one is there's a toggle function, which just tells me if I already pressed the button or not. We don't need to deep dive into that. And then there's a reference to a style sheet, which is simply taking everything I'm having on the left-hand side, especially these two. These are just two buttons, by the way, and style it in a nice way. So let's reload the page. And now we have these nice buttons here, which look like from the flight. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't take anything out of that session, just take these buttons with you. And so let's just initialize the viz by clicking on exactly this first button in here. So let's call it our initialize viz function. And then the second one is the function I was just adding here, where I'm saying I want to show the parameter or I don't want to show it. So I put some images behind each and every dot, and I can enable or disable them, and that's exactly the function I'm using here. It's simply taking our viz, it's taking the current workbook, and it's changing the parameter to show clusters equals yes or no. That's basically it. Okay, and that's what's happening over here for the second one. So now let's see if everything works. So this should now start our visualization. Worked fine. Now we can filter on cluster 3. Still works fine. Now let's see. Here we go. Awesome. So these are now like representatives of one of our most famous Tableau public authors. And you see how many views they have in total, how many visits they have in total. And you can see, I mean, these are like serious guys. And if you just go to a different cluster, these are just funny ones. And these are the ones who are looking up. And so therefore, let's just hide them. Cool. So again, like I said, you will get all the code of that. That was just the introduction of how to actually start with it. So Google for it, use the tutorial, and then customize it to your needs. You don't need to recode everything from scratch, right? I mean, that's not what you should do. It's not efficient. And with that said, I hand it over back to Jackson.
All right. All right, thank you, Timo. So as you guys have seen from Timo, the JavaScript API really has a lot to offer. And now I want to deep dive into a couple of these features and show you guys how you can integrate the JavaScript API with third-party libraries and potentially create something that's valuable for your business. So the first one is the data refresh feature. And as the name suggests, it allows you to programmatically refresh the embedded instance of the viz. And it also posts in any updates from your data source. It's equivalent to clicking refresh on the toolbar, as most of you should be familiar with. So in terms of using this feature, it's actually really simple. It's just one line of code, and you just have to invoke the refresh data async method on the high-level viz object. And it enables a variety of use cases. I've seen people build cool hackathon applications to actual workflow automations that is valuable to their business. And one of the popular scenarios that it enables is the write-back scenario. That allows you to take insights from your viz, and based on those insights, you can modify the underlying data source accordingly and have that change reflect back to your viz. So now I would like to show you guys a quick demo that I built. Let me switch over. Cool. So what I have here is an application called Status Update. And on the left side, I have a dashboard which tracks the performance of each salesman on the team over time. And the bottom here, we also have a worksheet on the sales target. And as you see here, the green line here, this is Timo. And for the first 3 months, January to March, he's doing really well. But in April, not so much, right? But knowing Timo, he's probably having something big going on. So let's assume that on the last day of the month, Timo actually made a really big, closed a big deal. So he would come into this application. He would enter his name, and then enter the size of his deal, enter the date on which the deal was closed. And this manual entering of information can actually be even can be replaced by selection APIs, and I've seen companies use that to automatically populate some of the rows in the data source. But here, for the demo, I would just manually enter those. And as I hit the update this button here, oh, that's interesting. Is this just not? Okay, it still didn't work. Okay, technical difficulties. Give me 1 second. Hopefully it's not the internet. It's fine. Is the internet just down? The internet just broke, really? Let me try connecting something else. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. This one's faster? Okay. Oops, sorry about that. we can blame the Wi-Fi. Okay, let's refresh here. Yeah, let me see if this is connected. Google seems to be working. What is going on? Am I just not getting stuff back here? Okay, just try opening this. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like the demo is not working quite well right now. Yeah, so I guess I'll just have to kind of explain this. So in any case, what you should have seen is that the graph that you saw with Timo, you should have seen the graph update with the new data that's appended. And that new data will reflect back on the viz, and you will see the viz update and show that Timo has finally, he's number 1 again in the month, and he's also fulfilled his sales target. Okay, so so just in terms of how to build a application like this, the workflow is actually quite simple. So you would start off with a web application, and you would have an instance of Viz embedded inside this web application that is connected with a live connection. Oh, sorry. That was not so good. Okay. Okay, so sorry about that. So here's the kind of the workflow for building a write-back application. And so as I said, you would have a web application with an embedded Viz that has a live connection to a online data source. And the web application would need permission to write to the data source. And in this case, I've used the Google APIs and the Google worksheets to accomplish this workflow. And finally, you can use the refresh feature to have the Viz pull back updates from the data source and have it update the visualization. Cool. Now, okay, so the next feature that I want to introduce is the get data feature. And it's actually one of the most powerful features that we have in the JavaScript API. So what is this get data feature? It's modeled after the view data feature in Tableau Desktop. And as the name suggests, it allows you to programmatically grab data from an embedded instance of a Viz. And it comes in 2 flavors. So with the get summary data async function, you can get back the aggregated data that's used in the worksheet. And that corresponds to the summary data tab that's in the view data feature in Tableau Desktop. And the second function comes in terms of the get underlying data async. And that one returns all the fields that is used in the data source, and that corresponds to the full data tab in the Tableau Desktop feature. Cool, so why is this powerful, right? So once you grab the data out of the Viz, there's actually a lot you can do with it. Just in terms of visualization libraries, there's just so many. There's D3, there's Viz.js. And there's also a lot of APIs on the web that you can use to integrate with the JavaScript API and create something that is really cool and valuable. OK, so I have another planned demo here. So let's hope this one goes a little better. see, this one refreshes. Yeah, so while it's refreshing, so this application is called Find Your Jedi. Oh, shoot. This thing is, working with two machines just keeps getting me every time. OK, so you guys see this all right? OK, so this application is called Find Your Jedis. And this is actually based on real data that is from Tableau Public. And it's about all the authors that's on Tableau Public. So on the left here, I have a dashboard. And the top worksheet is about author popularity. And on the y-axis here, I have the number of workbooks that each author has published. And on the x-axis here, I have the number of followers that each author has. But the bottom here is just the list of workbooks with the view counts. So right off the bat, you can kind of see there's an outlier in the data set. And you can see here that it's been a little slow. So this one is this author is Analytica, and actually they just published a viz that has about 90 million views. And that's kind of destroying our viz, so let's filter out this outlier to make our viz a bit more useful. So now the viz looks slightly better. And it's actually interesting to kind of look at this data from Tableau Public, and right off the bat, you can kind of see Sean here. He's published about 1,800 workbooks, but in terms of followers, in terms of view count, he's not doing so well. But for the purpose of this demo, let's focus on the authors that are actually popular. And what I have on the right here is a network diagram of the top 25 or so authors in Tableau Public based on the number of followers that they have. And each node here represents an author, and each edge here would represent whether or not one author is following the other. So just based on that, and just looking at the overview of this network diagram, you can already see that all the authors in all the top authors, they are actually actively following each other, and you can conclude that they're probably learning from each other. And now let's say that we want to take a look at the author with the most followers. So let's click on Jewel here. And as we click here, we see that the bottom view here is focused on the workbooks that Jewel has published, and also on the network diagram, it's automatically synced up and focused on Jewel here in the network diagram. And that is enabled by the JavaScript APIs. So now let's say that we are interested in looking at one of the followers who's following Jewel. So let's look at Michelle here. So we can click on Michelle here, and as you can see, interactions from the network diagram would go back to the Tableau viz, and the Tableau viz has updated to focus on Michelle here. And I've also built a search functionality, so in the case where you have a name in mind, you want to look for a certain author, you can just go to this search functionality here, and let's say we are looking for Adam. So as I search for Adam, both the network diagram and the Tableau viz has focused on Adam here. And as you can see from the workbook views here, Adam has published a viz on Beatles analysis, and that's where he's getting most of his views from. So now I'm interested in looking at the viz that Adam has published. So we can double click on Adam, and now what I have here is just a simple profile of Adam, and this is the list of visualizations that Adam has published on Tableau Public. And you can see that Beatles analysis is the most popular one that he has. And we want to look at that, we can just click on Beatles here. And what we have is a fully interactive embedded instance of the viz. So this is another advantage of the JavaScript API. With the JavaScript API, you can embed multiple instances of multiple vizes into your custom web application. And from here, we can actually just kind of go through and look at all of the vizes that Adam has published, and they would all be fully interactive vizes. Cool. So that's kind of the end of the demo, and you can kind of see how we can bring multiple workflows and bring these really deeply connected integrations where you can build an application with multiple vizes working together to show more about your data. And there's actually a lot more patterns you can see from this network diagram. But because of the time constraint, I won't be able to show this here, but all these demos, they're all on our Dropbox and it's in our GitHub. So you can feel free to go download that code, and there's instructions on how to run this demo, so you can feel free to go download those and play with those and kind of explore the data set. Cool, so with that, let me switch over to the presentation. All right, I got this one right. So another quick flow for building and custom application like the one that I showed. So you would start off with a Tableau viz, which I have shown you in the web application. And then you would use the get data feature to kind of grab the data from the viz, process the data a little bit, and pass that into whatever third-party library that you want to use. And you would have a custom application that is fully connected. So another feature that the DataDev API enables is dynamic selections. And what I mean here is that the selection search function that I built is actually not hard-coded. So before, when you had to use filters or selections, you might have to hard-code in each one of those values. But with the getData API, you can get back the domain of each field within your data source. So you can actually use those to kind of dynamically build selections or filters. And the flow is, again, pretty simple. You use the getData API to grab the data, get the list of all the authors, and then in my case, I pass it into a library called selectTool.js to build this search functionality. And I hooked up the interactions using the Tableau Selections API. So I hope you guys liked that demo and thought it was cool, but that is really just the tip of the iceberg, and there's just so much more you can do with the JavaScript API. And last year, the hackathon winner for the JavaScript API, they actually used the JavaScript API to integrate with their natural language processing platform, and they actually built something that's really cool, and it's just amazing. And in terms of like libraries, there's like 300,000 JavaScript libraries that's on NPM that you're free to download and integrate in whatever ways you can imagine with the JavaScript API. So the opportunity here is really limitless. So now I will hand it back over to Timo, and he will show you guys what our customers are using with the JavaScript API.
Thank you, Jackson. So yeah, let's have a look at a couple of more examples. So this is the most basic one. We already talked about that, right? You have a portal. You just simply embed vizzes in there, and it helps people and our customers to actually let business users create these vizzes, and then like the author or the department which is responsible for the whole portal, like being separated. They can work independently from each other. Questback is another example in EMEA. They are actually a feedback company. So if you're thinking about flying from one place to the other, oftentimes one of the first things you're getting from your airline is, was your flight in time? Have you been happy? Well, I mean, you should already know that, right? And they're integrating all these different data sources and make that like a flow. And so all these visits you can see here is part of their customer portal when they're reaching out to their Tableau visualizations. The first page always looks like that. It's showing like a flow where the data is coming from. But the real magic here is they are also using our REST API to say, okay, now we have a new feedback form, which we send out to some people on their mobile devices. And then they can dynamically say, well, I want to select from all these different questions, I want to analyze these 5. And then they publish a data source they can immediately use within Tableau server. So it's really both, the combination of REST API and our JavaScript API. Mapcase, if you're into skiing and snowboarding, they are offering a platform of integrating with many different apps. When you're hiking, snowboarding, skiing, they're collecting all that kind of data to provide you with where's the best restaurant, where's the best route you should ski early in the morning. And then people can also make screenshots of that or photos of where they have been, and also they can visualize all the routes they have been throughout the day. And they are offering the right back possibility to their customers to say, okay, I love that route, I love that place, whatever it is, dynamically. And this down here, by the way, is a nice visualization of a Net Promoter Score, which is getting more and more popular in terms of an important KPI for many of our clients. One last picture I'm showing you before I'm just showing you a couple of more demos really quick. This one is an example of like an Esri application, like a Geo application, which one of our clients, Nemia, is using to actually pre-select certain things. So where is the risk the highest for the next thunderstorm or something like that? And then this actually filters the Tableau viz and vice versa. So if they just want to have a look at a certain age, then they filter Esri and vice versa. It's again, a combination of a couple of tools. And I mean, if you use the power of having different layers in your Geo tool plus Tableau, that's really a huge potential for cool applications. Okay, so let's have a last look at some other things I created, but customers are actually running that like physically in their environment. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing like a business kind of classification of certain customers. And on the right-hand side, you're seeing an audit department. And the goal here really was that the audit department by itself can define different clusters than the business is doing. But they want to be able to know who created that cluster and when did he or she created it in order to be able to review that. Okay, so what you can do here, for example, is as one person, when you're working in an audit department, saying, okay, I want to cluster these top 5 risk customers as something like that, top 5 risk cluster, whatever. And then you can write that into the database, and then that is just being stored in the database, and you directly see, okay, what is the profit for this cluster? And it gets better to see if you're creating another cluster. So let's call it something else. And we're writing that back into the database. And then you see you can perform like comparisons of different kind of clusters, which really helps that audit department, to review things they created while they did it. So another cool thing, which the JavaScript API helped them to solve the problem. This example is from a bank which has more than 1,000 different measures. And they were like, okay, we love Tableau, it's fine, right? But one thing is we can't let users decide in an easy way which measure to choose from. So what they really wanted to have, and again, I'm relying on the network, is something like a tree selector. So they are used to use tree selectors for all the different measures because they have so many of them to actually filter the viz based on the measure they chose. So that's one other way, one other use case you might use. And this part over here is, again, a third-party library, and that one is a normal Tableau visualization. 2 more examples. So that one, actually, I brought up for a company which will also be on stage throughout the week. And they have a customer portal. People are accessing that. And their problem was that the performance was not right, because sometimes 10,000 users are accessing the same entry page. And then the server is just heavily on load. So what you could do, for example, and that's what that visualization is showing, once you're hovering over a visualization and you see these moving pluses, that means the visualization is not yet loaded. Nevertheless, even if it's not loaded, you can already click on it, and then you get that static image of that visualization. And once it's done, it will just replace both things, and you can then interact with that in a dynamic way, right? And that's how you can get like most of both worlds. You directly give them feedback, and once it's done, you can just use it like you would use Tableau for. Again, code will be available. One really last thing I wanted to show you, it's done by Russell Christopher. He's using many different things, and the one I love the most is the never-ending dashboard. So have you guys seen it? Some of you? Some of you? It's great. So, I mean, first of all, you're scrolling down, and you will get visits forever. Not really forever, but I mean, the performance is great, right? But why is that? It's because it's just pictures again. And once you're clicking on that, you get the dynamic viz. But again, it's a nice use of immediate feedback for the end user, and then you can interact with that. So love that. So let's wrap it up. We looked at that in an interactive way. There are some more sessions, how you can create actually a Tableau portal or how to embed Tableau. That's both tomorrow. And then on Thursday, there's a retail power hour, whatever that means, but it's a developer session. And mobile app bootstrap. So if you're not happy with the UI of our own Tableau mobile app, come and see us in the lab because you can provide feedback, but you can also use the mobile app Bootstrap to create your own mobile application. This evening, there's the hackathon final. There will be like a winner, and after that, we're going out drinking, so don't miss that part. And there's some resources. So you might want to take a picture of that because that's where the whole content of all the dev sessions will be at. It's a Dropbox folder. You get all the content from there. Nevertheless, there's also something independently from all the sessions published on GitHub, where you see next to the stuff about the JavaScript API, like Tableau, TabPy stuff, really cool things. Developers.tableau.com is just our internal portal. And if you're into videos and you want to get some content via that, just search for Tableau and then hashtag DataDev on YouTube, and you get many cool and nerdy stuff from there. Before you're going to leave me, a quick summary. So we saw how to actually start with the Tableau JavaScript API. We could see how it can interact with third-party applications and vice versa. And then you saw like a couple of customer scenarios. These will be all the links. You will get them after Tableau conference. That was just all the demos you've seen. Make sure you rate the session. I still hope that we are allowed to have nerdy sessions like that where we code in front of the audience, and you need to make sure that this is going to happen in that way. And other than that, we probably don't have time to take questions in the huge audience, but please come and see us up front and give us some feedback around it. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.